Let's see if I can hold the mic steady. Number one. So have you ever sat in your doctor's office on a Friday afternoon wondering what was so urgent that it couldn't wait until Monday? Well, that was me shortly after my 44th birthday, wondering what was so important it couldn't wait. And all the thoughts were, it can't be good news if it's that important. And then sitting across from my doctor, her giving me the news, and going to that place of shock and confusion. You know, I was the healthy one. I exercised, I ate well, I worked, I did the strata council, I did union work. So there wasn't a lot of me in any of that time. I was always the doing. So for about 6 months before that, I was getting messages that something big in my life was going to change. And I found out later I have a gifting called clairaudience, where I get messages, words, tones that aren't spoken. And I'd had kind of messages like that from childhood, but I never really paid much attention to them. When I was about 7, my mom was in hospital for about a year, and we were separated. I lived with my cousins. And I was going to school in the morning, and I was insistent that we had to do the art project in the morning. And my teacher just said, no, we're doing it in the afternoon. And I wasn't the kind of kid to talk back to my teacher. I go home at lunch, and my mom is there. We're ready to leave. So off we go. So over the 6 months, things would happen, and the message back would be, no, it's not big enough. Until finally sitting across from my doctor and her telling me I have breast cancer. And then the message was, yep, this is it. Now what? So life became total confusion and chaos. There were all these decisions to make. What type of surgery? Margins weren't clear. More surgery, radiation, tamoxifen. And I couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to do. So I ended up sitting on my sofa for about 6 months. Light was streaming in, and I just sat there in quiet. No sound, no music, no TV, nothing. And I finally had to be honest with myself and ask myself, what do you want to do with your life? How did you get here? What's happening? And do you want to continue on this trajectory? So I finally had to get the courage to be honest with myself and go within. And I touched into that little one within that was so sad and had been the good girl to be able to cope with life, and stuffed all those feelings down. All the trauma, all the sadness, all the anger, whatever it was, wasn't able to be expressed. So I wasn't brought up to be successful. I lived in a house with an alcoholic, rageaholic father, a mother who was mentally ill and suicidal. I was sexually abused. We moved all the time. As you can well guess, there wasn't a lot of stability in that. So all of that had been stuffed down, and now was the time to take the courage and actually begin to feel those feelings. So I continued to do that and carried on, and I'm moving towards going back to work. And I really didn't know how to integrate this experience into my life. And I came across a book that was really helpful, and it was called Dancing in Limbo. And what it talked about is that process after treatment, and then there's this transition and integration of the knowledge and coming into your new normal. Now for everyone else, they've been carrying on and they expect you to come back as to how you were. But that's not for the person who's been through that life-changing experience. So I was looking for that new normal. And during that time, I was going to all these relaxation groups because I didn't know how to relax. I'd been a type A personality, and to tell me that I was going to sit and do nothing, that wasn't me. And I was told about a retreat through the Callanish Society, and I put my name in. There was a last-minute cancellation, and I was on the ferry and off to Cortes Island. And I spent an amazing week. We ended up being a group of all women, and some women were close to death. So we just bared our souls and talked about anything and everything. We didn't have to worry about anyone, hurting their feelings or tampering down what we wanted to talk about. And my big aha moment came when I had the one-on-one session with the counselor. And we talked about what cancer meant for me. And it wasn't about loss. I'd had a lot of that already in my life. That was a lesson I'd already learned. For me, it was about reconnecting to my spirit. I'd spent my life kind of going towards it and then away from it. And every time I kind of touched towards that spirit part of myself, I became afraid. I didn't really feel worthy. It's like, who, me? And this was finally that opportunity to really open myself up and really feel the love that was there for me, from my spirit self and from Source. And with that newfound knowledge and perspective, I came home, and again, heading back to work. And I came back into the workplace after spending all this time alone and in quiet, and was around all these stressed out people. And it's like, how can I be around these people? I didn't think I could manage it at all. And serendipity again, I go to a wine, cheese, and tarot card reading party. And I meet a woman who said, oh, I took this course and you get grounding and shielding. Jump in again. The following Tuesday I was in class. And within a week, I already felt better. I wasn't taking on other people's feelings. I was able to stand my ground and really not get that buffeting from people that I used to feel from being sensitive and not knowing how to do that. And so I loved the course so much, I ended up teaching it. And now I teach it to adults and children and just love to see them connect to their spirit. So I go back to work, and I'd been doing union work, and we hadn't had a female president in the union yet. And a lot of people wanted me to run. So I'm having lunch with a colleague, and she says to me, are you going to run for president? And out of my mouth came, no, I'm going to be a healer. And I felt myself looking around the room as to who said that. It didn't feel like it came from me. It didn't feel embodied in me whatsoever. And so she actually went off and did become union president and did that for many years. And me, I took off doing my own thing. And I'd already had that background of the psychology and the counseling and conflict resolution and all of that stuff. But I didn't know how to incorporate the spiritual part, which was the training in power, and then learned other modalities to really help bring our feelings forward and integrate all of those parts of ourselves. Because those are just little pieces. We need the whole thing to really be whole. So I believe that spirit speaks to us all of the time. And it's whether or not we're listening and taking action. And if we don't listen, then that becomes louder and louder until it's actually hitting us on our physicality. And then we have that choice. Do we want to live or die? And some people do choose to die. They would rather not be honest with themselves and their loved ones and change their lives. And we know instances of that in most of our lives. So we can have the choice. And I could have continued on that road back at work, doing the other things that really weren't my calling. And I could have continued to have car accidents and find ways to meet those unneed mets of nurturing that I wasn't able to express. Instead, I took that spirit route where I could bring those unconscious hurts and wrongs forward so I could actually learn to how to nurture myself and take care of myself and do it from a conscious place. If you're familiar with Louise Hay, she talks about how emotions get trapped in our body and they come out in certain ways. The breast is around nurturing, cancer around grief and secrets. And those were the lessons that I needed to learn. So I believe we all have some form of trauma, and it can be something fairly insignificant to others all the way to the extreme. But it's just part of living. You know, our parents and the people in their lives have their own woundings, and they didn't know any better. So we take that on and start to take that beating ourselves up over from what other people did to us. So I believe the way in is through kindness. We need to have that kindness for ourselves so that we can be honest and come from a place of non-judgment and acceptance of what happened. We all have little ones inside that were hurt, that felt alone, abandoned, because those adults that we trusted and thought were going to protect us weren't there for us. And so now we can come back as the adult with support to actually help them walk through that and really acknowledge and witness what they went through and let them feel those feelings and release them so we can move forward and bring those unconscious patterns forward into our consciousness and actually address them. So with the kindness, sometimes we don't always have really good role models for that. So the more that we can get help from others to help us to learn that. I go with kindness because even though compassion is what a lot of people talk about, I find that compassion is really difficult for a lot of people to really understand, and especially to have for themselves. But with kindness, it's a little simpler for people to understand. When you think about a baby or small animals, we can actually tune to that feeling of kindness. And once we have that kindness for ourselves, then we can have that kindness for others. And we can actually create a world of kindness, one person at a time, and actually create that life of freedom that we're all entitled to and that we all have our birthright for. Thank you.